Okay, call this meeting up. Let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I did when I first started. Okay, so this is a live board meeting, as all of ours is. I'm gonna adopt an agenda. So can I have a motion to adopt? Augustus first, Naomi is second. All in favor? Okay, motion passes. The study session meetings are designed for the purpose of having administrative updates to the Board of Education. There are no public comments at study session meetings. Residents may attend the next scheduled business meeting, 9th, 2021, and/or contact the board via email at boe@shenschools.org with any comments or questions. All questions come into the Office of Public Information Officer and are shared with the board and/or superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions, concerns are typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions, concerns are typically addressed by the superintendent and/or designee. Tonight, we are going to kick this off. This is live view for our board candidate interviews. So we're ready to go. Mrs. Carmen's bringing our first candidate in.
There's 6, but there's 7 on you don't rank them on the introduction, is what I was getting at.
Okay. Costa, did you hear that? Your number 1 does not equal introduction, so you're going to, all right?
Seat right there. Perfect. Thank you. You're welcome. Oh, hello. Hello. Oh, no pressure. I'm like, wow. Okay. So, welcome, Mrs. Gallo.
Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth Wood. I'm the Deputy Superintendent, and I'm going to be the interview facilitator this evening.
Perfect.
So, to the board, this is Andrea Gallo, our first candidate this evening. Mrs. Gallo, we are going to ask you a series of questions tonight, and for each question, we have a specific amount of time allocated. If you see Mrs. Ford-Roth, they're right over here, she is going to let you know when you are down to 1 minute, and then again when you are down to 30 seconds, okay?
Yep.
And then from there, we're going to wrap up and move on because we are on a tight timeline, just 20 minutes for the total interview tonight. Okay?
Got it.
Great. So we're going to start off by asking that you give the board a brief introduction of yourself, and we'll allow 2 minutes for that.
Sure, absolutely. So I have 2 boys in the district. They're both Iguana. I have a 6th grader and an 8th grader. My boys transitioned from a private Catholic school, and so they've actually only been at Shen for the last 2.5 years. I've spent the last 2.5 years reflecting and thinking through how can I best serve them in a district of this size, coming from a very small school. They were at St. Mary's in Boston Spa. I've always been very involved and enriching their lives. Noah, my 8th grader, has an IEP, so since 2nd grade, I've just partnered and collaborated with every single person that I could find that I could team up with. So it sort of brought me to like where I am today and reflecting on how can I give back? How can I share, my experience as a parent, and just really just kind of dig deep and find ways to support everyone and trying to have the best education possible.
Thank you. So the next question is, who do you view as the constituency of the Board of Education? And for that question, we'll have 2 minutes.
Yeah, so when I was doing my research, I was kind of thinking about this question, and, representing a single constituency is in really nobody's best interest, so I feel like it's the entire community, so parents, ultimately the students who are sort of in this kind of the circle of the hub, teachers, administrators. I mean, I think everybody is, part of the process, and the board represents all of the entire community. in terms of, the constituency and who we are here to serve. So I think for me, when I was kind of looking at taking on this project and kind of digging deep into where I can best serve, that's who I was thinking about, is there's everybody as part of the process, and finding a solution to have our children be the best that they can be post high school, and be able to serve the community.
So moving on to question number 3. How should our school board balance the need for public interest, so in other words, what is important to all, versus special interests, so defined as what's important to a few? Please provide some examples of how you think these topics should be addressed to balance what are often seen as competing interests. And for that question, you'll have 4 minutes.
Yeah, so I think that, especially right now with the pandemic that we're in, I think that's where the focus is, and how can we best serve everybody's needs. And when I was kind of thinking through what does the educational system look like to everybody, it's different for everybody, right? I mean, it's different. My son has an IEP, then I have a 6th grader that doesn't have an IEP. So everybody's needs are different, from academic to, social, and there's so many different aspects of what's important for people. Can you just repeat the question? I want to just make sure I stay on track.
Sure. So it's how does our school board balance the need for public interest versus special interest is the overview. Do you want the whole question again?
No, that's good. Yeah. So I think, again, it's representing everybody's, what's the concerns of the community. And the board has to, look at every aspect of what the concerns are, whether it's fiscal responsibility that we have to all of the the people at the state level and people at the at the federal level, as far as funds that are coming in. How do we balance resources for the teachers and for the staff? Because everybody has their own interests. Everybody thinks may think they know what's best. But I think as the board, we definitely need to be mindful and collaborate on what all of those ideas are, and collectively as a group to determine, is this in the best interest of everybody? Is this in the best interest of our teachers and of our students and of parents and guardians, etc.?
So on to the 4th question. What do you see as the primary role of the Board of Education as a whole and you as an individual member? And what do you think will be your greatest challenge in assuming this responsibility? So for that question, we'll have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I think that, for me, again, kind of reflecting on this, I think the role of the Board of Education is again, representing the entire community. And being, again, very diligent and mindful of each and every student and each and every student's needs, and the needs of the teachers and the staff and the administrators. I think, again, it's collaborating, it's working together, it's teamwork, and being mindful of all of the responsibilities that we take on as a board. From, like I said, fiscal responsibility and academic achievements. And I mean, our goal is to provide a fruitful environment for our children to learn. And I think it's, all of those responsibilities will collectively ultimately work in the best interest of all of the students. So, yeah.
So question number 5, what do you view as the top 3 issues or priorities of the district and Board of Education?
Yeah, so
That's 4 minutes.
Okay. So what I was looking at, so at the top of the list that I thought about is definitely the pandemic, and what does that mean as far as the learnings of our kids, right? We've got kids remotely learning, we've got kids hybrid learning, we got CBL kids. So right now at the top of what I see is critical is until we've, people are vaccinated and we reach herd immunity, which is, 75% of the population, do we continue to kind of evolve in this environment that we're in? So I think, and what does that mean as far as, the social and emotional aspects of learning? So I think that's at the top of the list for sure. The budget, of course, I think is really a top priority as well in terms of managing the funds that come in and that we're facilitating out and doing everything that's mindful and diligent as far as the resources. I mean, we're looking at, I'm big in, and this is not necessarily a top priority, but how do sports play out? I mean, that as far as social and emotional for our kids. I mean, I have two athletes, right? Football is their thing, and how do we balance, the priority of what the community's asking, right, and wants to see, and what's going to be in the best interest and safety of everybody involved. And I think that probably ties into COVID as well. And one of the things I was kind of listening at is like this bundling of services, and is it, in the best interest of the district to have different services that kind of come in bundled, or are we able to be more creative with having, our services not come in where we can determine where, the monies are best spent within the district. I mean, there's many. I've got like several listed but I think also the big thing is just quality of education for sure. The kids are able to see themselves. I know right now we're looking at a lot of different informational text and our books, and and I will say this: I have diversity and inclusion is big for everyone. I work for a very big pharmaceutical company, and I'm on a committee for that, and I have an African-American husband. I have 2 biracial children. It's critical for me for diversity and inclusion is big. So I would say pandemic, diversity and inclusion, equity across the board as far as education is concerned. Those are I would say, the top 3.
Thank you. All right, next question. There will be occasions when a board member's personal opinion contradicts the decision of the board. What should that board member's reaction be? And to that question, we'll have 2 minutes allocated.
Yeah, so I think it's all, when I think about, I sit on several boards and especially through work, and I think a mutual respect and a mutual trust among board members is important. I think there's always going to be room for disagreement, and I think that it's important to continue to respect each other and listen to opinions, and be able to collectively have the opportunity to kind of think through the process and try to be part of the solution and not necessarily part of the problem. But I do think there needs to be opportunities where people can share their thoughts and opinions, and not everyone's going to necessarily agree. But you have to come to some type of common ground, because ultimately the goal is to, serve all of our constituencies in the district. And, but people are entitled to their opinions, but we have to find common ground.
And on to the final question. Of the many different roles and responsibilities a board member has, what intrigues you the most, and what areas do you see yourself having the greatest influence? And for that, we'll have 3 minutes.
Yeah, so when I was kind of thinking through what I live my life, both personally and professionally, by pillars, right? And when I was kind of looking through the Shen, all of what Shen's pillars are and the mission, and how do I align myself and embody all of what Shen stands for. And it definitely, what stood out for me is that we are, we're trying to engage around a common interest. And when I looked at some of the, some of the important details, one of the things that kind of stood out for me is that everyone collaborates. That you're a team, that you work together in the best interest of our students. And again, the fact that diversity and inclusion is at the top of the list, that we're looking, through sort of like an equity lens to bridge the gap, so to speak, because we've got significant gaps right now going on in society. and that, you know, any place you look around the school, there's a message of some sort kind of focused on inclusion and diversity. And so, and I feel like when I kind of read through the mission of the Board of Education, and I was thinking through, can I embrace this? Is this something that kind of fits into my wheelhouse and how, you know, I live my life with, you know, my husband and my kids, and that just seemed to be what fit for me, because I don't take lightly, right, where I get involved. I mean, you can probably ask anybody at Guana, you know, they know who I am. I really take an active interest in a role, and I'm so grateful for everything that this school is doing, you know, for my boys. I mean, a child that has an IEP and he's an 8th grader, you know, what does that mean for high school for him? So I really kind of looked and dug really deep into what the Board of Education does and what their mission is. And that's what's important to me in giving back.
So thank you very much. As we've reached the end of the interview, what I should have done at the beginning is ask that you just reveal your full face for
I
just
can
a
certainly
minute.
do that.
You know, it's interesting. There we go.
There it is.
We hate to run into you at some point and not know that
I
we
know,
had met for
I
a
know.
period of
Sometimes I
time.
don't know if people are laughing or crying behind their mask, and it's like so scary. Like, are they yelling at me? Are they swearing at me? What exactly are they doing?
So that is it for us for today. Thank you very much. And
you.
yeah, we appreciate your interest in serving on the Shenendehowa Board of Education.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
We're gonna announce the two finalists tonight.
Okay. So, Mrs. Gallo, just to let you know, we will be announcing later tonight the two finalists for the position. It will be part of the live stream later on.
Oh, okay, wow. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, good luck. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Do we need to put our initials on these sheets?
Yes, yes, so wave your name on it anyway, so.
Right.
So it should be fine.
Oh, yeah, in my column, yeah, that's
I
great.
guess you wrote it in the wrong time.
No, that's good. Look at mine.
Yes, thank you.
I think we
picked up
should,
on that
I
based
think
on-
Kathy should collect them. I don't think we should pass them to each other.
No, Mr. Chase is gonna come and
Yeah.
collect them.
Come on, Todd.
Go ahead, Pat.
Would you grab question number 3? What'd you do?
Yeah, I had to do a side. I had to do a side thing.
So, Dr. Robinson, just a housekeeping matter. I may not see if we run long and Vanessa holds up the sign, so if you could just kind of wave to me. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, actually, I have to lean back maybe this
I
way,
had to move hers because I couldn't see it.
but I'm afraid to move Elizabeth, so I'm just gonna.
No, it's fine. I can see over Elizabeth. I just.
Actually, maybe I should just move my whole table that way.
Don't move your table, please.
Don't move the table, okay.
So can we keep going, or we don't have to wait, right?
Now, if board members are done, we could get started next.
Yep,
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll get it.
we're good, Becky.
Yes.
Yep.
Elizabeth.
All right.
Someone else?
I have this many. Yes?
So the next one is Jason.
Hello.
Can I have a seat right there?
Welcome. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So,
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, welcome. This is Jason Digiani to the board. So, Mr. Digiani, I'm Elizabeth Wood. I'm the Deputy Superintendent. I'll be facilitating the interview this evening and going through the questions with you. Thank you for your interest in serving on the Board of Education. We have a total of 20 minutes for the total interview this evening, and so each question has a set amount of time. I'll let you know as I ask the question how many minutes you have, And you see Mrs. Ford Rother right there. She will
right.
hold up when you're at 1 minute, and she will also hold up when you are at 30 seconds left. All right?
Thank you.
And so maybe, we appreciate the mask protocol, but at some point, we'd love to see your full face too. So maybe just for the introduction and then put it back on.
Sure.
Okay? So we're going to start with allowing you 2 minutes to provide a brief introduction.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you for allowing me to come in for this opportunity. So again, my name is Jason Digiani. I am a resident of Clifton Park for just about 20 years now. Moved here right after college with my wife, Lauren Digiani. She's a counselor in the district. 2 daughters, Chloe and Mia. Chloe's in 6th grade, Mia's in 4th grade. Guana and Arenda. So by way of just some background for me, my personal experience and some of my background, I'll take this on kind of where I started in education, kind of how I got here. But my first career really out of college was getting into the academic profession. I taught political science and studied political science over at SUNY Albany, and I was on that teaching path for a while. So my first step and taste there was in teaching at the college level. It's at the college level where I think I really got an understanding of the love and passion for education, but then also an understanding and a recognition of the what the path of a student is getting to that level and how much is needed to get them ready for college, because I saw a wide variety of students in that situation. But I'll probably have a chance to expand on that a little bit more. But after that, I started working for New York State, where I'm currently employed. I work at the New York State Division of the Budget. I work primarily in procurement, although I will say since the beginning of the pandemic, my day-to-day life has been solely consumed with working on various issues related to the pandemic, including acquisition of PPE, which is, as I think everyone's read about, impossible. And I'm currently day-to-day heavily involved in the vaccine effort, which, again, I think everyone's read a lot about, and I know there's interest here. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So we'll go back to mass. Thank you. So the first question after the introduction is, who do you view as the constituency of the Board of Education? And we're going to allow 2 minutes for that
Okay,
question.
sure. So the constituency, first and foremost, is the entire community. Everyone who is a member and a resident of this district is a constituent by direct. They are taxpayers, they are voters, they have an informed interest and an active interest in the district itself. Obviously, then there's, I think, some concentric circles you go down a little bit. You then start talking about the students who are obviously in here on a day-to-day basis and who are directly primarily serving. You have their parents, who obviously have a very significant interest in the goings-on of the school. You then have the community, the employed community of the school district. So you have your teachers, counselors, district leadership, everyone who makes the operation run. But again, I think it's important to stress that it's the entire community has an active interest here, because you still have tax-paying members of the district who they may not have a student enrolled right now, but they have an interest in what's going on in the school and how it affects their lives in the community. So again, there's a broad category there. Obviously, I think the students and the parents and the employees get a lot of attention because, again, we're talking about day-to-day operations, right, and exactly what's going on in the here and now. But I think it's important that you keep that open view of everyone that's involved. And especially as a board, you're going to hear from all of those constituents. You're not just going to hear from a student or a parent or a teacher. You're going to hear from a local business or another community group or, the library, the towns. Or just a taxpayer. So the constituency is broad, and again, there's a lot of different angles of how they're interacting with the district, but I think you have to acknowledge all of those.
All right, so the second question. How should our school board balance the need for public interest, meaning what is important to all, versus special interests, what is important to a few? Please provide some examples of how you think these topics should be addressed to balance what are often competing interests. And for that question, we'll have 4 minutes.
Okay. So I think, look, the public interest is an important one that frames the curriculum, where the school is focused, where the board is focused. I think looking at that and how that drives everything is a critical piece for the board. That's primarily a board's role, is vision, is recognizing that and having that view of where the district is going in that bigger picture perspective. I think when you then recognize specialized interests, right, and the few and the individual, that's where you want to make sure you're balancing that in as well. And I guess I would say for a district of this size, I think this is where I think you're uniquely positioned, or this district is uniquely positioned to deal with both. So if we're talking about, let's just say, curriculum, the variety of courses that are available or classes that are available, it could be languages that are taught or electives that are taught. The size of the district allows for a greater variety, right? Where you're not necessarily, you may have fewer students of an interest, but you have the ability to afford that class and that opportunity. Same thing with certain interests, sports, athletics, clubs, and activities. So I think you're allowed to, you're capable of, not allowed to, but you're capable of hitting on those interests, right? Because you have access to those resources. At the same time, though, you don't lose sight of what's in for all, right? And I think that's an important component to keep in mind. And I think particularly in times like today, and what we're, where a lot of things that are going on in our world today, I think there's a common interest perspective that is important, right? So there's a lot of individual perspectives. There may be a lot of special and particular interests, but I think recognizing the common interest as well and instilling that is important, right? You're always trying to kind of balance those two, especially I think in an educational construct, right? You have a variety of students and teachers and people that are coming into these buildings every day. And everyone comes in with a unique story and a unique background, unique circumstances that sometimes are apparent, sometimes are not apparent. And there needs to be a way, and I think it's important that we work towards successfully balancing those individual needs, right? And they cover a variety of things. It could be specific educational needs. They could just be particular interests. They could be certain circumstances at home that make the educational experience more difficult than it is for others in the community. So how do we accommodate and address that? But then at the same time, bring that person in as a common member of the Shen community, right? And say that you're also part of this bigger thing. So, okay, you have interests, you have circumstances that may be unique, but you're also part of this bigger group, this bigger organization. And how do we create that connection? So I think, I think my answer to that is there's a balance between the two. But I think with a district of this size and the ability we have is, I think the opportunity to hit on both of those key notes, right? Have those specialized focus, but at the same time, keep the public interest going.
Great. The next question. What do you see as the primary role of the Board of Education as a whole and you as a member? And what do you think will be your greatest challenge in assuming this responsibility? It's 3 minutes.
Okay. So the primary the primary role of any board, right, but in the Board of Education as well, is to keep and set the policy and the vision and the direction of the organization, right, and establish that, and really do so in a way to support the executive, the leadership team of the organization, all the members of that team, and then ultimately the constituents that are being served, so the students. So I think the primary role, and the things that make that successful, I would say, some key things and what I would bring are communication. I think that's a critical component of that, and it's communication both to and with the leadership team and the teachers and the district leadership, but then also communication out to the community, right? Because a critical component for any of these for any organization is that the community it's serving understands what it's doing, why it's doing it, in a way that really you don't create a vacuum of information, because anytime there's a vacuum of information, people fill it, and they usually fill it with something that's not good or not helpful, right? So communication. And communication is two-way, because then it also means taking that information in, right? So as a board member and a board, it's, you are responsible to hear what your constituents are saying and bring that to the board and bring that into the conversation. So I think a key thing here is as a board member, you're not here as a one person with one viewpoint and one need. You are a steward of a public trust. You are bringing that with you. So again, the communication piece goes both ways. How do we help get the board's message out? What are we doing? Why are we here? What is the purpose the goals we're achieving? How do we communicate that? But then what am I hearing from the constituents, and what does the board hear as a need that there is, or something new, or new direction we need to go in, or a particular problem to solve? I think there was a second point, a second part that I may not have hit on your question.
What do you think will be your greatest challenge in assuming this responsibility?
Okay. So the greatest challenge, I think, always, I mean, communication is one, but the greatest challenge is there's a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of needs out there. There's a lot of interests out there. And I think that the greatest challenge is twofold. How do we distill that and recognize everybody's needs and interests and what they're looking for and what they need out of the community? How do we distill that into actions we can take, or policies we can set, or things the district can do? But then at the same time, how do we accept that, get that all done, but then at the same time communicate out? Because the way that works also is not everybody's going to get to come in and put something in like the request box, and then we just go one by one and do it, right? So how do we take that in, curate that, figure out how we're going to accomplish these, but then at the same time communicate back out either the what we're doing or why maybe we couldn't hit that particular thing at this moment.
So what do you view as the top 3 priorities or issues of the district and Board of Education? And for that, 4 minutes.
Okay. So I think number one, you have to discuss the current COVID pandemic situation. I think that's the number one if we're getting specific in the here and now, right? This is the primary issue we're focusing on. And I'm sorry, what was the time again?
4 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I think that's the number one issue. Obviously, everybody's in completely uncharted territory that is constantly changing and shifting, and all organizations, but schools in particular, that has to be the primary focus, or that's front of mind, whether you want it to be or not. It's the front of mind issue. It's affecting everything schools and every organization has to do. I will say, what we're learning, because I remember all the discussion in the summer leading up to school opening, and the questions and the webcast and the community conversations, there was a lot of nerves about getting back to school, and especially in person. And clearly we've learned that this is a safe place to be. One of the safest places to be is schools, and I would say Shen in particular has done an excellent job. But I think dealing with the pandemic is first and foremost, how do we get back to normal, right, and do so in this most safe way possible? And before we can get to normal, how do we bring normal into the situation we're in right now? So I know, for example, athletics has been a lingering thing we just had with the counties now, and the governor opening that up a bit and working through that. But how do we bring normal back into the district? So we're operating here, but how do we continue to have art, music, athletics, different educational experiences? How do we bridge the gap where you can't have as much hands-on activity or interaction among the students? So I think that's number one. Number two, responsibility and issue facing the board. I think the next thing always, and I say this coming from working at the New York State Division of Budget, budget is always the issue, but I want to say 2 things on that. There's the obvious reason. The budget is how we get the resources to fund the school, fund the initiatives, get all the great things we want to accomplish done. But the budget is also, and this isn't me saying that I'm borrowing this phrasing, but you look at a budget, it tells you a story of what matters, what's important, right? So every budget for every organization is an explanation of what is important to that organization, what are its priorities, and what does it care about. So our budget is not just how are we going to figure out the money, how do we balance what the state's providing in their local aid issues, how do we get something that the community is going to vote for and support, But what is the story we're telling through this budget? What are we investing in? What are we saying we care about? Where did we put this money and these resources? So again, budget is critical because, and I'll also say for the constituents, for many of them, unfortunately, that might be the primary interaction they have with the board in the district. The one time a year people are coming out maybe to vote, right? So this may be our only shot to tell that story. That through this budget, this is what matters, this is what the school's doing, and this is why it's good for you, the community, and everyone we serve. And then the final thing, again, I think is, you know, the vision of what we're here, the purpose of this. I will say, you know, to take it back and from the broadest view, what is the school for and what is public education for? Why are we in this? We're creating fellow citizens, right? This is what the key part of, I think, education is. We are creating fellow citizens from kindergarten all the way through they go to college or into the workforce or wherever their journey takes them. But this is the time where we are setting them on their path to be a member of our community, right? And that, I think, is an important and very important role.
Thank you. There will be occasions when a board member's personal opinion contradicts the decision of the board. What should that board member's reaction be? 2 minutes.
Okay. So one, I could speak with this from experience. I didn't get to touch on this in the introduction, but currently I'm a trustee on the Clifton board, the Clifton Park Half Moon Public Library. I've been there for 10 years, and I've served on other boards in the past. The role of a board member, and as part of the board, and when we're in working sessions, committees, executive session, whatever's going on, is to discuss, debate, work through policies, work through issues. The board then votes and acts, right? And everybody has an independent vote on the board, and they do that. You place your vote. But then an action is taken. And I've found that a board works best when the board works as one, right? Now, up until that point, let's argue, let's discuss, let's get into it, let's put all the viewpoints on there. But we make a decision and we act, and there's a process, there are rules, there's a way the votes take place, and we move forward and we go. There is no value anywhere on any board I've ever been a part of, or nothing gained, where a board member, after a decision is made, going against that or creating a rift, that doesn't help anybody, right? It perpetuates maybe a problem that the board, maybe a difficult issue the board's been wrestling with, right? It's going to perpetuate that, continue that noise. But at the end of the day, that's not the purpose of the board, right? We are a community body working together as one team. That's the intent. Now, as far as personal opinion, right, if it's something like that, I touched on a little bit earlier. Being a member of the board, I don't come in here, I'm Jason Digiani, here's what I think, what I care about, and that's what I'm going to take up a portion of the board for. I'm a representative. I'm a representative of the community. I've been given a trust from the community. And I think every board member, and this is how I deal with it at the library, we are a steward of a public trust, responsible for an institution, and to continue that institution the way the whole community expects. So personal opinion, you have to balance that, yeah.
So of the many different roles and responsibilities a board member has, what intrigues you the most, and what areas do you see yourself having the greatest influence? 3 minutes.
Okay. I'll be honest, I think the thing that intrigues me the most of joining the board, first and foremost, is participation and being part of another group within, being part of what makes the community run. I mean, this is how I see myself with the library, or getting involved in any of the other town committees or anything else there. It's participating in our community in an active way. I think that's a very important point, and it's a very important thing. That's what kind of intrigues me and gets me going in general. Specifically for Shen and joining the Shen board, I have a pretty unique perspective and background, I think. I've had an educational background. I am a lifelong learner. I continue to be curious about the world, and I think that's a passion that is of utmost importance to try and instill in any of our students and everyone, frankly. I am, as I said, I'm a spouse of an employee of the district. I get a perspective there and a different understanding of what that's like and what matters and how they see the world and what's going on. I have 2 daughters in the district. So it intrigues me to take all of those different perspectives and my professional background, my background on boards, and bring that to bear, again, participating, right? And I say participating, again, not just as like it's cool to be part of the group, but be an active participant to help shape, again, the vision, the purpose, the direction of the district and what we're doing here. There's so many huge issues that come in front of the district. I know the pandemic has been one, but I remember after Parkland, the community conversation after that, and the community coming out. And again, I know you guys see those spikes when there's a big issue, right? People start to come in and talk. But there's so many of those things that pop up unexpected on our radar that the board has to deal with, and the community has to deal with. And I think it's critical and it's so important that as many people as possible are active participants in their community, right? So to me, again, what intrigues me is getting into that. Now, education, again, through either my family or just personally, I've just, for my entire life, been tied to education. That's why I continue to, I taught, I've been on like the board of the library, focusing there on different kind of educational aspect, but still lifelong learning, right? I mean, that's been that used to be the library's motto, and now it's meet, learn, and do. But learning is a critical piece. So what intrigues me is to work in this setting, and then also to again help the community be part of that community to drive that. So.
Thank you very much. So, Jason, we appreciate your interest in serving on the Shenendehowa Board of Education. After we conclude the interviews this evening, the board will go into executive session. The 2 finalists will be determined through the vote count, and then it will be announced later this evening.
Okay, great.
Thank you very
All right.
much.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, all right. All right, shut the hell up, Todd. Still, no, the size. No.
Oh, you did? Oh.
Your whole hands go with the shirt.
What color is that?
Aqua.
So I wanted
Yes,
to-
we're fine.
we should-
Sorry.
Even when you said come in and 11 minutes later, it's like when you
Oh
come
my
in.
God, Todd.
It actually coming in that late, it actually messed up my view for the whole meeting. So, it's the weirdest thing.
I don't know why.
But what happened one other time is why I think it's when you come into the meeting.
I have no idea. I've never heard of that before, but I'm sorry that happened to you. That's,
So what it does is it slots everybody. You see little slivers.
yes.
Have a seat right there. You're welcome.
Welcome. Welcome, Mr. Weber.
Thank you.
So, Board of Education members, this is Joseph Weber, and I'm Elizabeth Wood. I'm the Deputy Superintendent. I'm going to be facilitating the interview this evening. We have a total of 20 minutes for the interview. For each question, we have a designated amount of time, and it varies by question. And Mrs. Ford Rother, right over there, will be holding up when you have 1 minute left and when you have 30 seconds left. We are going to begin by having you provide a brief introduction of yourself, your background, and we'll allocate 2 minutes for that. And for that, we're going to have you take your mask off, but then after that question, we'll have you put it back on for the remainder of the questions, just so that we're able to see your full face for at least a short period of time. All right?
Sounds good.
So we'll begin with a brief introduction.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for inviting me tonight. My name is Joe Weber. I am a resident of Clifton Park in the Shen District for just over 7 years now. My wife Maggie and I moved here back in 2014 as a relocation for my company. We have 3 daughters, Kaylee, 5th grader at Tisago, Alexis, a 2nd grader at Tisago, and Addison, who will be joining Tisago in 2 years as a kindergartner. I was born and raised on Long Island, got my bachelor's degree in economics from Holy Cross in Worcester, Mass., and my MBA from Clark University in Worcester as well. Excuse me. I have been working for the past 15 plus years for a company, Public Consulting Group. We do primarily public sector consulting work across health, human services, and education space. I'm part of our health practice, but also intersect with our education practice quite often. And my focus is on really helping our clients navigate how to set policy based on current federal and state guidelines, and also how to navigate some of the financial challenges that comes with being public sector agencies. So, maximizing funding when it's available, and looking for ways to increase available funding. So that is quick background on.
Thank you. So the first question, who do you view, and we'll put your mask back on for the next one. Who do you view as the constituency of the Board of Education? And for that, we'll allocate 2 minutes.
Right. So I think the constituency is, it starts obviously with the larger community, the Shenendehowa community, that all of the individuals, all the businesses that pay taxes that help support the funding for the district. Obviously, moving in from there, it's the families, it's the students that attend Shen and rely on Shen for their education, for their services. And also as part of that, you have the administrators, the teachers, the faculty, the staff within the district. That entire group all would serve as the constituency. They all obviously have very different needs, very different desires for what they're seeking from the district. And so I think one of the challenges is navigating the varying needs of those various constituents.
The next question. How should our school board balance the need for public interest, meaning what is important to all, versus special interests, what is important to a few? Please provide some examples of how you think these topics should be addressed to balance what are often competing interests. 4 minutes for that question.
Okay. So one of the things, again, with my background being in the public sector, one of the things that we're often tasked with is dealing with that specific issue in terms of dealing with, the interest of an overall population versus a select few, and how to consider all fronts. In terms of balancing that, I think at the end of the day, the priority is addressing what is the best for the overall community, what's the best for the overall district. But I also understand that there's a need to also make sure that within that you're not losing sight of the needs of those special populations, of those with special interests. One of the ways I think of navigating that is having a sense from the community what those priorities are, what the importance of the different interests are within the conversation, and being able to have an open dialogue about the impacts of the interest of the larger group versus the interest of those with the special interest, and being open to finding ways to compromise between the two as well.
So what do you see as the primary role of the Board of Education as a whole, and you as an individual member, and what do you think will be your greatest challenge in assuming this responsibility? 3 minutes.
I'm actually going to start at the back end of that question. So I think the biggest challenge is, coming into this as a new member of the board, there's a lot of information that needs to be absorbed. There's a lot of processes. There's a lot of it's a lot to take on, and understanding as well that this position, at least for now, is time limited through the end of May. So it's a lot of information to uptake and to be able to make a meaningful contribution. So I think that's the biggest challenge for whoever assumes this position, is just getting up to speed, understanding all of the responsibilities, understanding all of the processes that need to be followed as a member of the board. In terms of the priorities of the board, I think One is, making sure that the district is in a sound financial position. I think that's a huge challenge in the current environment, given what we know in terms of the pressures on state funding and local tax resources and dependency on federal dollars. I think that's a huge priority for the board. I also think, from that, one of the main responsibilities is making sure that every student in the district has access to an equal level of education. And in a district the size of Shen, that's a significant challenge. The district I grew up in was of equal size. We had 12 elementary schools, and it was a broad geographic area. And so, saying that everyone, has an equal education is difficult in this dynamic, that the education at Tisago isn't necessarily the same opportunity is presented at Tisago that it is at Orenda or Iranjan, but it's not, I think how students access that education, how students are able to partake in that education may be very different across the district. And I think one of the challenges for the board is how they help to make sure that the opportunity is equal across the entire district.
So what do you view as the top 3 issues or priorities of the district and Board of Education? 4 minutes.
So as I mentioned, I think one of the top priorities, one of the primary responsibilities of the board relates to the budget. This year, again, for the second year in a row, I know last year's budget was extremely challenging given the onset of the pandemic. I think this year is going to continue to be challenging just based on everything we've seen out of the governor's office so far. I think there is optimism coming out of the federal government with the administration change for some support coming from that end. But I think budget is one of the priorities. I think one of the other priorities for the board is around navigating what I think is again, just a changing landscape in the public education space, that, what public education is responsible for now doesn't look like what it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And I think on top of just the changing landscape in general in public education, the new responsibilities being put on the districts by federal requirements, by state requirements, you have to navigate now coming out of a pandemic and how the district starts to move into a post-pandemic world that's not necessarily going to look like it did a year and a half, 2 years ago, in terms of how students are educated, how they interface with their school. And then I think also the expectation that the graduates of public schools may not be looking for the same thing that they were looking for 5 years ago, that there may be more of an emphasis on moving directly into the workforce, that there's a lot of literature right now that supports that idea that students aren't valuing a post-secondary education at the same level. So how does the district help bridge that gap to prepare students that want to move into a post-secondary education versus those that want to move into a post-secondary career, and how to navigate that. And then the last piece, I think, goes to a topic that I know a number of industries are navigating, and that's around the topic of diversity and inclusion. And how do we make, how does the district become a more diverse district? How does the district, become more inclusive? I know the state is putting forth legislation right now that is focused on creating a more diverse platform for education, that there's an emphasis on creating opportunities for faculty, for staff, that more represent some of the changing dynamic in terms of the population, in terms of the diversity. And so, how do we as the Board of Education help support the district in addressing that and facing that challenge and helping to work through that?
There will be occasions when a board member's personal opinion contradicts the decision of the board. What should that board member's reaction be? 2 minutes.
Yeah. So this is, again, in my line of work, this is a pretty common occurrence that depending on, we work in the public sector, and so there's going to be decisions that are made that are contrary to your personal beliefs, whether it's political or otherwise. And we have a policy and a direction that it's, at the end of the day, the client is correct, that we, no matter what our beliefs are, no matter what our position is, we have to do what's in the best interest of the client. And so I think translating that here, we're all going to have our own personal opinions, our own personal beliefs that form some of how we approach different topics. But I think at the end of the day, we have a responsibility that's bigger than any individual. And so I think to the extent that the decision, the direction is made that is in the best interest of the district, regardless of what our personal opinions are, I think we have to be accepting of that. I think there should be an opportunity, there should be an environment that encourages people to share their individual perspectives, as long as it's done in a respectful manner. But to be able to share and have their thoughts, have their feelings on the topic heard. But at the end of the day, if the decision is made and it's not in line with your own individual beliefs, I think again it comes back to supporting the best interest of the overall entity and not the individual.
Of the many different roles and responsibilities a board member has, what intrigues you the most, and what areas do you see yourself having the greatest influence? 3 minutes, and this is the final question.
So I think I'm most intrigued in just being involved in the budgeting process. Again, I think most of my background is in public sector finance, and having a better sense of how the budget comes together, how the different pieces all work into the equation, and how that ultimately ends up influencing larger decisions around within the district, in terms of staffing level, in terms of, different decisions as it relates to the curriculum and whatnot. So that part I think is the most intriguing, the most exciting to me. I think leveraging my experience working with various government entities, including the State Education Department and the Department of Health here in New York, and understanding how things build up from the federal level down to the state level and then ultimately get passed down to the local level. I think that's where I'll be able to best fulfill my role on the board is helping to navigate what is a pretty challenging environment and complicated environment, and one that's constantly shifting, one that's constantly evolving, and figuring out how to best navigate that constantly shifting space. So.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your interest in serving on the Shenendehowa Board of Education. There will be an announcement later tonight about the 2 finalists as have been selected by the board. So if you tune in a little later on, you'll hear the decision.
Great.
So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you.
Yes, testing. Yep. So, Lacey Griffin Broff, are you able to hear me? We cannot hear you. We're working on it. You want to try it again? Let's see if we can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Great.
So, welcome. I am Elizabeth Wood, Deputy Superintendent, and board members, this is Lacey Griffin Broff. I'm actually going to pause for just 1 second while we do some housekeeping work here. I'll just make sure we're all set, and then we'll begin in just a minute. Are we all set, board members? Great. So, Lacey Griffin Broff, thank you for your interest in serving on the Shenendehowa Board of Education. We have a total of 20 minutes for the interview this evening. And for each question, we're going to have a finite amount of time. Are you able to see Mrs. Ford Rother? Do you see her holding up a pink sign?
I do.
All right, that pink sign says 1 minute, and then when she flips it over, it says 30 seconds, and that's the timer to count down for how much time is remaining on the question.
Okay.
So with that, we will begin by asking that you provide the board a brief introduction to yourself for 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you guys for taking the time to chat with me. I know I intended to be there in person, but unfortunately I was encouraged to self-isolate. So I'm glad that we have the technology for me to be able to do this virtually. So my name is Lacey Griffin-Brock. I have 2 kids in the school district. One will be soon. She's only a toddler. My 6th grader is 7th grader. She's in Octay. And I had a 4th grader. No, my 7th grader is in Acadia. My 4th grader is in Octay. We have been in the school district for about 3.5, 4 years now. My initial interest to join, to become an integral part of the kids' education began about 1.5 years ago, maybe 2 years since COVID. I was invited to participate in the Cultural Celebration Awareness Day at Octay, and that's really what sparked my interest with trying to become, I see the sign, with taking more of a advanced role into my kids' education, and I wanted to continue to build on the district's progress with diversity and inclusion, and that is what sparked my interest to join the board.
So on to the first question. Who do you view as the constituency of the Board of Education? And for that question, we'll have 2 minutes.
I would view the constituency of the Board of Education as the community members, the faculty, the staff. I think it takes the entire community to participate and make decisions around what policies that influence the children in the community and the students in the school district. I think it takes a lot of teamwork for everyone to be on the same page and to work together to enhance and improve the education of the students.
The next question. How should our school board balance the need for public interest, meaning what is important to all, versus special interests, what is important to a few? Please provide some examples of how you think these topics should be addressed to balance what are often competing interests. So we'll have 4 minutes for that question.
So there's the interest of the board, right? And there's the interest of the public. And I think it takes a lot of creativity and clear communication to get to a common ground. Communicating with, being able to be transparent with the community about what the goal is, what we have to do, and really soliciting the feedback from the community, the faculty and staff on what it is that they would like to do, what they would like to see done, and listening empathetically to figure out where the common ground is. Listening empathetically, I think, is a really key component, and when you're working with 2 groups of people with different interests.
So the next question. What do you see as the primary role of the Board of Education as a whole and you as an individual member? And what do you think will be your greatest challenge in assuming this responsibility? And for that question, we'll have 3 minutes.
I think the primary role of the Board of Education is to support all the students and within the school district, support the students to become contributing members of the community. That doesn't just include the best education. That also includes, helping students problem solve, helping them learning how to work together as a team, just preparing them to go into the real world. I think one problem or challenge that I may face is just being new. I'm new to the community. I would be new to the board. So I think I would really have to figure out, especially during COVID, how to go out and meet people, how to introduce myself, how to gain the trust of community members, and like I said, listen empathetically to the needs of community members that I don't know. So I think that would be a challenge I would face.
So what do you view as the top 3 issues or priorities of the district and Board of Education? And for that question, we'll have 4 minutes.
Okay. COVID-19, I think, is a huge issue and challenge that a lot of school districts are facing. You are not only struggling with, health and wellness of folks, students included, faculty, staff, and community members, but we also are now faced with virtual learning and really ensuring that students are given the platform and opportunity that is equivalent to in-person. And that can be a challenge because you really have to partner with families and parents and grandparents and community to make sure that they get the best possible learning in that virtual space. So I think that is one challenge. Managing budgets is a huge challenge. So I work for the AIDS Institute, and I manage $1 million budgets that the Department of Health gives to hospitals and programs, and every year we're faced with budget cuts. So, it's super important to really think creatively when you're managing the budgets and figuring out the best way to meet the needs of the public when the pocket is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So I think being creatively with budget cuts and figuring out how to manage the money while meeting the needs of the public, which is, can constantly change. I think another challenge is really increasing diversity, promoting diversity, and decreasing racial bias, so that each student has a fair opportunity to a quality education. And that can be tough, I think I'm an active committee member on the Diversity and Equity Committee, and they've done a whole lot of work to educate folks, to work with faculty and staff. They've invited students to participate in the committee. So I see that as a challenge that not only this school district face, but other school districts face. But I think those would be my top 3 challenges.
There will be occasions when a board member's personal opinion contradicts the decision of the board. What should that board member's reaction be? 2 minutes.
Well, we all come from different backgrounds. We have different upbringings, so it's naturally that we are going to have differences of opinions. But I think one of the great things about working in a team environment is the differences, right? I think your background being different from mine is going to bring a different perspective. So I think I said listening empathetically earlier. I would expect that to be a key component when there's differences of opinions between 2 people. Listening to the difference, figuring out where the difference lies, and trying to find a common ground. But it's important to really respect others' differences and appreciating these differences.
And the final question. Of the many different roles and responsibilities a board member has, what intrigues you the most, and what areas do you see yourself having the greatest influence? 3 minutes.
So, what intrigues me the most is having the ability to be impactful on my future doctor. I think, as young people, and I see them as my future doctors, my future Social Security administrators. So having a key role in ensuring that, helping to ensure that those folks are well-rounded, that that they'll listen to needs, that they will be contributing and kind members of this community is really intriguing to me. And I think, I don't know if I said it earlier, but that is one of the really important things of why I am so passionate about working with young people, because they really are our tomorrow. As we get older, we are going to rely on them to be our nurses and our doctors and, help us with retirement. So that would be the most intriguing part. Can I briefly ask you to repeat the second part of that question?
Sure. What do you see as, what areas do you see yourself having the greatest influence?
I think I would have the greatest influence in continuing my work with the Diversity and Equity Committee, just because I have such a strong experience in my personal life, but also my professional life, working to reduce racial health equities and disparities. So I think that bringing that experience to the table would be probably my greatest strength.
Thank you very much. So we appreciate your interest in serving on the Shenendehowa Board of Education. The decision is going to be announced later tonight after the feedback from the board is tallied. So if you tune in later tonight, you'll hear who the two that have been selected to move forward are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I knew, but. Yeah, you have time. I think you. Yeah. I always loiter down the hall.
Still on live stream, please. Okay, sorry. Thank you. he's like, yeah, you're back there, but so you're not compensated. Because I was like, you contractual, if you want to, it's in work. He's like, well, of course I should work. It's just that it's not enough pressure or not too little pressure on getting compensation. He's going to, so now you can, out of back, which can be partially, if do it right. One of the things people don't think about is how that person will, what's that functionality? So just like one of the things I want to do is, you know, it's like, you can't have an athlete, so you probably want to go and that's all they coach, you want to do this and this. He's like, so for you, I have to think no different than someone would say, I'm just a casual golfer or a casual walker. So it was pretty nice. I was like, wow, didn't even think about those things.
Yeah, that's interesting, good, okay.
Yeah,
Probably.
now that we started,
Yep, you guys, we all good?
Mr. Preston's there.
Nope, not yet.
Yeah, we're ready.
We still have time.
We're missing Bob.
Oh, yeah, no, he's coming right now. Okay.
Okay, Becky.
You're good?
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Good evening, welcome. So, this is Peter Angus to the Board of Education. Mr. Angus, I am Elizabeth Wood, Deputy Superintendent. We welcome you and appreciate your interest in serving on the Shenendehowa Board of Education. So this evening, we have a total of 20 minutes for our interview. Each question is going to have a set amount of time. If you see Mrs. Ford Rother right over here, she'll hold up when there's 1 minute left, and then again when there are 30 seconds left to the question. And so with that, we will begin in just a minute, but I'll say for the first question, which is a brief introduction, we'll ask that you remove your mask, but just for that first question, the time limit is 2 minutes, and then we'll mask up again for the remainder of the questions. All right, that way we can see your face. All right, so if you could begin with a brief introduction, and we'll have 2 minutes for that. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for having me this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all. My name is Pete Angus. I grew up in Clifton Park, was here until probably 2005, so I'm a graduate of Shenendehowa. Started out, I went to college, I graduated from Oswego. My plan was to teach secondary English. I think it was in this very building where some middle schoolers broke me of that. So I ultimately ended up going into marketing and technology. So I was a project manager and ultimately moved more into strategy, worked at several marketing agencies over the years, and that's really been my focus. I work locally for a company that's a real estate developer, and we do senior housing primarily. I did spend about 8 years in Boston, so we moved back here in 2014. Have 2 young children, and they kind of drove us back to be near family. And we have been, they're both in Carrigon in 5th grade and 2nd grade. And we've been in Clifton Park since.
Okay. So we'll go back to the mask and move on to our first formal question. Thank you. So who do you view as the constituency of the Board of Education? 2 minutes.
There are lots of stakeholders, I understand. You know, the first I would say is our students. You know, we're here to, build an incredible educational experience for students in the district. And, you know, I think that's priority one. And I guess 1 and 1A kind of going together is the wider community. Obviously, working to get that buy-in for everything that we're doing in the community, and we really work for them as well. And then obviously faculty and staff, you know, it's a big piece of creating a successful environment is making sure that we're partnering with all the folks who are here and part of the system.
So how should our school board balance the need for public interest meaning what is important to all, versus special interests, meaning what is important to a few. Please provide some examples of how you think these topics should be addressed to balance what are often competing interests. 4 minutes.
It's, I think with everything, and as a parent, I'm well versed in negotiation with my children and my family. But that negotiation is everywhere, right? Everything is a balancing act of doing what's going to, you have to make trade-offs. And I think that, while I'm sorry, I'm gathering my thoughts. We need to look at all of our stakeholders, the community, the students, our faculty and staff, and we really need to make decisions that we need to negotiate. Everything isn't going to be one size fits all. We need to balance, and in my mind, this is where, we think about equity in education. Things are not one size fits all. Every student's needs are different, and every resident in the community is going to have a different opinion. I think in the initial questions I sent in, one of the things I said was, I think we really need to spend a lot of time listening and understanding everyone's point of view and taking their point of view into account, and making decisions that are fair for all parties and all stakeholders.
What do you see as the primary role of the Board of Education as a whole and you as an individual member? And what do you think will be your greatest challenge in assuming this responsibility? 3 minutes.
The board's responsibility is, start with working together and partnering with the staff within the district in crafting and ensuring that policy is strong. I think part of that is, and another piece of that is, obviously budget. I'm sure that's top of mind, especially right now. And I think, one of the largest challenges for any new board member coming in is, I don't think it's understanding policy. I think there's a lot of material, and you all have put together, you spent some time on the website. There's a great amount of material out there, and getting up to speed on that I think the biggest challenge is going to be getting to know all the stakeholders and getting to understand, how process works, and how to collaborate with, the board, with the community, with the district as a whole, and build those partnerships, and doing that quickly, and being in a COVID world that's a little bit more challenging, now than it was a year ago. But I think that's critical in building these partnerships and really understanding the workings of how everything works.
What do you view as the top 3 issues or priorities of the district and Board of Education? 4 minutes.
I think, in this current environment, obviously, again, everyone is thinking about budget, but really the first priority really needs to be focused on students and living in this kind of crazy world and environment that we're in. So I would say top priority would be that policy. How do we craft policies that are going to be effective and, promote, equity in our educational programs for all students? I think as the pandemic continues to evolve, it will be a challenge to continue to find new ways. I think the district's done a wonderful job with where we are today. I tell my kids all the time how fortunate they are in the situation we're in, but it's going to continue to evolve, and I think that will be a challenge that isn't going to go away in a month or 3 months. It's going to be here for a long time, and continuing to find new ways to leverage technology and seek input from the community and find new and innovative ways to do things, I think is going to be a exciting challenge, but a challenge nonetheless.
There will be occasions when a board member's personal opinion contradicts the decision of the board. What should that board member's reaction be? 2 minutes.
I think differing viewpoints are important, and I tell my team at work probably every day that my ideas aren't always the right ideas. They're ideas, and we're here together as a team to collaborate and think about different viewpoints and find an innovative solution to whatever problem we're working on. And I think that's the same here. And, the other thing I tell my team is, in everything that we're working on, it's not a win-lose situation. It's a let's come together and find a great solution situation. So even if you have differing viewpoints on something, you need to listen to other folks and understand their viewpoints. And I think at the end of the day, as in, with my day job, your opinion and ideas isn't always going to be the end solution. And, state your point of view, share ideas. But then at the end of the day, when a decision is made, you need to get on board and support that decision and be supportive of your team.
Of the many different roles and responsibilities a board member has, what intrigues you the most, and what areas do you see yourself having the greatest influence? 3 minutes.
I was excited about this opportunity because just been thinking about ways to give back and be involved in the community and offer my expertise where it could be needed. I think that technology is something that excites me, seeing the way that the district uses technology and looking for new opportunities. It's part of what I do in my day job. So looking at technology and solutions to create better experiences for students is exciting to me. Continuing to work on some of the programs, some of the programs that I see coming out of the district, and an example is the Bountiful Backpack Program. I love it. I think it's great. We contribute, we get involved, and we're excited to be a part of that because I think it's such a great program for the students who need it. Really excited for that kind of opportunity. And, my roots are, my formal education is in education, and getting back to that. Looking back, I have some really great memories of, working with students who maybe, had special needs, or maybe their situation was a little bit different and they were just a different kind of student, and finding ways to connect with them and help them succeed were the most rewarding, moments of my time in teaching. And to this day, I think back to those a lot. I talk to my kids about those times. And, I think being able to serve on the board and being able to impact that and continue to do some of that would be a great experience.
Thank you. So that was our final question. We very much appreciate your interest in serving on the Shenendehowa Board of Education. Later this evening, after all the interviews are completed and after a brief executive session, we will be announcing the 2 finalists that have been selected to serve out on the remaining term of the Board of Education. So thank you very much. We're all set.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you. So, Board of Education members, this is Rajesh Narasimhan. I'm Elizabeth Wood, Deputy Superintendent. We appreciate your interest in serving on the Board of Education.
Sure.
We're going to have a series of questions for you this evening. We have allocated a total of 20 minutes for tonight's interview. At each question I ask, I will tell you the amount of time we have.
Okay.
And then Vanessa Ford-Rother, sitting right over there, will hold
Sure.
up when we're down to 1 minute, and again when we're down to 30 seconds.
Okay. I'll close my eyes when it comes to 30 seconds.
So recognizing that we have the masks on this evening, we'll ask that you take the mask off just to answer the first question, which isn't really a question, it's an opportunity to introduce yourself for 2 minutes. After the 2 minutes, we ask that you put the mask back on and we'll ask the question.
Okay, so I can remove my mask for the first 2 minutes, right?
For this first question,
Got
which we'll move to right now, which is now is your opportunity to provide a brief introduction of yourself to the board for 2 minutes.
Okay. Hi all. My name is Rajesh Narasimhan. I'm originally from South India. That's where I did my high school. I got my undergrad there, but I came here to do my master's in US. This was 21 years ago. So I got my master's in civil engineering with structures emphasis, and I've been working here since then. I came here on scholarship, so I always gave education the foremost importance. That was the forefront policy in my family. So I know how education helps. The education brought me here. And also, for the past 10 years, I've been living in the capital district. And in 2017, I moved to the Shenendehowa School District. I have 2 kids. My eldest daughter is 7 years old, and she is in first grade, Sharakan. And my son is 21 months old. So in probably 3 years, he'll follow her footsteps. So that's a small, brief introduction.
So we'll go, yes, thank you. So who do you view as the constituency of the Board of Education? And for that question, we'll have 2 minutes.
Okay. Constituency is basically, I will consider the people that we serve, which is basically you, me, and everybody we meet around in our school district area. It's basically the students. It includes the students as the priority, main one, and then the family, and everybody that is supporting the entire area of our where the school district conforms. So I would say constituency is basically us, along with anybody we see, within our school district.
How should our school board balance the need for public interest, meaning what is important to all, versus special interest, what is important to a few? Please provide some examples of how you think these topics should be addressed to balance what are often competing interests. And for that, we'll have 4 minutes.
Okay. Basically, in a democracy, basically that's what our board is also. Everybody has their own opinion. I may have a different opinion, like you all may have your own opinion. Most of them doesn't come together at the same time. That's why the question is. Majority of the people may think they want one, and a special group of people we cannot accommodate because of various constraints like budget and the ideas or policies that we put forth on them. So, but our policy, what I think is each and every student is important. Our final answer is every student should get high quality education. So, but their family circumstances may be different than others. Like I should be fine because I have graduate level studies, and I can coach my kids at home. But other families, I cannot assume the same thing. So they may need special needs. How do we provide it? We have to see whatever we can provide with whatever we have. In general, we have to please the majority of the community or the families, but then there will be special needs for certain families that we need to take care of it, either individually, by any means that we can, with the needs and what are the funds we have, and to make sure that they are satisfied at the end, because they are also paying the same taxes as what we are paying. So eventually, we need to somehow come out with situations based on the situation that is posed to us to appease everybody and make everybody happy. But the idea of the goal is every kid should eventually get the highest quality of education that we can provide. So that is my answer.
What do you see as the primary role of the Board of Education as a whole and you as an individual member? And what do you think will be your greatest challenge in assuming this responsibility? 3 minutes.
Currently, with the situation, we have to make sure how, as a board, we should get the quality of education that the kids should end up under the current circumstances that we have with the COVID and everything. The kids that graduate now should have the same education, quality of education that the kids that graduated last year has. So that is our primary responsibility. So that would be my first one. And the second one is like we have to make sure that we are concentrating only on their education right now. We should also worry about how are we preparing them for the life that they are going to deal with after their graduation. And the third one I would say is how we handle the main portion of education system is basically the budget. How do we deal with the budget with whatever amount of funds we have? How do we effectively use it to provide the best we can give education to the students? So that would be my answer.
So what do you view as the top 3 issues or priorities of the district and Board of Education? 4 minutes.
The top 3 issues. The first one is to see, again, I come back to the main thing is the students, the need of students' education, the quality of education, how we provide to them. The policies that we look at it right now, what we have, is it effective? Is it effective? Is it providing the quality of education that they graduate with? And how are we preparing themselves for the future in life? The second one is how are we going to make them prepare for the life after the graduation from school? A simple data fact that showed in New York, this is 5 years ago data, I don't have the recent one, that out of 100 job postings listed, 79% of them required at least an associate degree. And at the end of the education, the students, they were available for those posts were only 47% in New York State. This is not our school district, this is the entire New York State. So there is a lot of job openings that's available for the graduate students, but there is not enough graduates that's coming out of the school system that goes on to get at least the associate degree. So where do we lose the track of the students? The data shows that 1 in 5 students does not graduate with their class in high school. That's approximately 20% is already gone. Only 80% of the kids are graduating. Out of that 80%, only 75% of them go to the secondary level of education, which is associate degree or 2-year degree or 4-year degrees. And within that, the students, out of the 75%, there is not all of them are ready for the college students. They have to take remedial courses. Approximately 40 to 50% of the students has to take the remedial courses. So that's an additional cost on the students. And after that, out of that, even only like a few portion, like 50 to 60% of the kids graduate from the degree courses. So the whole idea is to impart into the kids in the basic, in the young level, like from kindergarten to 5th grade or kindergarten to 10th grade, to make sure to impart to the kids that education is important. If you get a college degree, you will be successful. So those things, small things that we can implement in their mind right now, so they know they need to get an associate degree or a college 4-year graduate degree, and it will be helpful for them in the future life. And the third and final
criteria that I would say is coming back to budget. Everybody is, money plays an important role. We want to provide everybody with, all the students with a Harvard level education, but we cannot. So we need to see where our funds are and how effectively we can use it to maximize the quality of education we provide to them and what the students achieve when they graduate from our school district. So those are my 3 points.
There will be occasions when a board member's personal opinion contradicts the decision of the board. What should that board member's reaction be? 2 minutes.
Okay. As we all know, everybody has their own opinion. I have my opinion than others. It will not always match, but that's where we act as a board of education. Like out of 5 or 7 board members, the majority vote is taken based on what everybody thinks. That doesn't mean that I may have an opinion on a particular issue and everybody has some other issue. That doesn't mean that I have to give up my issue. Mine might be the best solution, but it's how I try to convince people to accept mine, or if somebody else has a better opinion than mine, I'm open to go with the best decision. So personally, I will not be worried about bringing my priority, but I'll be worried about how collectively as a board members we come out with the best possible outcome. Always, when I go on vacation to India, there they drive on the wrong side of the road or right side of the road. I don't know how to say. So whenever I come back from vacation, I always tell myself, keep right, because my instinct there, even if I spend like a month, is to go left. Here I always say keep right. So similarly, when I come into, say, board of meeting, I always say, students first. That's the mentality that I will have it until I'm done with the meeting. So it's always what's best for the students. If somebody else has a better option, I'll go with it.
Of the many different roles and responsibilities a board member has, what intrigues you the most, and what areas do you see yourself having the greatest influence? 3 minutes.
My personal opinion is the main criteria that I bring to the board is my experience as an engineer. I'm always a numbers guy. Numbers don't lie is what I always seen in my 17 years of experience in bridges. I worked on small bridges to big bridges, like suspension bridges. I've dealt with $100 million projects. Cost estimate is always the priority. So coming to the point is I'm always oriented towards making the best out of what we have. How to effectively, I lost my train of thought. What was the question again? Can you repeat once again?
Of the many different roles and responsibilities a board member has, what intrigues you the most, and what areas do you see yourself having the greatest influence?
So my main motive is to gather all the data that we have currently and analyze the numbers and see what works and what does not work, and make sure that what works we give more importance, what does not work we have to see how to fix it to work more effectively. So that would be my take on it.
Thank you very much for your interest in serving as a member of the Board of Education.
Thank you.
Later tonight, after we've concluded all of the interviews, the board's going into executive session. The results will be tallied, and then we'll come back into open session, and the 2 finalists will be announced.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
good job.
Are we still actually?
Yeah. Thank you.
Good evening.
Okay.
Welcome.
Good evening, everybody.
So this is Ram Lalakota, Elizabeth Wood, Deputy Superintendent. We appreciate your interest in interviewing for a position with the Board of Education. So this evening, we have 20 minutes for the questions. We're on a tight timeline. And I'll tell you after I ask the question how many minutes are allocated for that question. We'll look right over at Mrs. Ford-Rother, who will hold up when 1 minute is remaining and or 30 seconds, when we're down to 30 seconds, all right? So we will start off by asking that you introduce yourself for 2 minutes, and just for that short period of time, we'll have you take off your mask, just for the introductions, then we'll mask back up for the remaining questions, all right?
Okay.
So if we could begin with you introducing yourself to the board, 2 minutes, and you can take your mask off if you'd like.
Okay. My name is Ram Lalakota. I moved to Capital Region 2001, and 2005 I moved to Shen School District. I'm working as an IT consultant, but last 15 years, I'm working in a lot of community organization. And right now, I'm a planning board member for the town of Clifton Park. Also, I'm the board chair for the Tri-City India Association for the last 2 years. And also, I'm working with the Asian community. There are so many organizations. I love to be the community service. And basically, I'm an IT guy, but it's a 9-to-5 job. After that, I want to spend some time working with the community, which I feel I enjoy much. That's all for now. I don't want to say too many things.
Thank you, thank you. So who do you view as the constituency of the Board of Education? 2 minutes.
Constituency, like, all the people who are living in that Shen school district, and even though they're not citizens, I consider them as a constituency, because the reason is they're also paying the taxes, and their kids are going to the Shen school district, and they're part of our Shen school district constituency.
How should our school board balance the need for public interest, meaning what is important to all, versus special interest, meaning what is important to a few? Please provide some examples of how you think these topics should be addressed to balance what are often competing interests. 4 minutes.
In the school district, there are a lot of different culture people and a lot of the economic balance people, like, some people have too much money, some people are low-income people, there are so many groups. But as a school board or school district, we should take care of everybody. And some kids need more help as education-wise or physical needs or any other way. So as a school board, we should focus on the people, like, even there are a small group of people are there, but we should not ignore them. Pay attention as much we can, because when we are making policies, I think board is considered everything, but I don't know the board. So we should focus equally on everybody and keeping the view, because my experience, I didn't see too many people who has a need, but as a board member, I have to think broader. Take all the things consideration. If I don't know, I need to talk to some board members or some friends, families, whoever it is. Get some knowledge, and whenever I'm making my policy decision, I should consider all the things.
What do you see as the primary role of the Board of Education as a whole, and you as an individual member? And what do you think will be your greatest challenge in assuming this responsibility? 3 minutes.
What I assume is, like, board works as per the New York State Constitution, guide rules. Board makes the policies. Board prepares the budget. Board work on the study materials, all the student textbooks and everything. And primary role of a board is also, like, working with the superintendent, who is the main in charge of executing all the things. So those are the things we need.
What do you view as the top 3 issues or priorities of the district and Board of Education? 4 minutes.
At present, or?
Yes.
Okay. At present, this is a different situation. It's a COVID, and last 1 year, there are a lot of things has been changed. And even this is the time we need to change our thinking process also, like, before we have different priorities and different set. But now, how to give the most better things to the student who are unable to come to the school, who are unable to participate in the sports, participating in any physical activities, a lot of things, so that we need to analyze those things based on our budget. We can amend some policies to make a room for all those things. And end of the day, education is a top priority. But also, from the education also, how kids are behavioral changed, because they're sitting all the time in front of computer. They don't have any social interaction. How we can help them? So these are the things we need to do.
There will be occasions when a board member's personal opinion contradicts the decision of the board. What should that board member's reaction be? 2 minutes.
See, I feel like, I worked in so many boards, so many organizations. Everybody has a different background, different experience. We learn only based on our experiences, but that means we don't have 100% at present. So it is always first thing to listen properly, what their opinion. Don't make the rush judgment. Once you listen properly, you try to understand what their opinion. And it's better when you are working in any board or organization, you should willing to accept the better suggestions. And end of the day, everything should be the polite way. And even if there is any differences are there, it should stay in the board only, in the board members inside. It should not go out. That is
Of the many different roles and responsibilities a board member has, what intrigues you the most, and what areas do you see yourself having the greatest influence? 3 minutes.
I have 30 years of IT experience, and last 15 years I'm working with the community, and I don't sit quiet. I'll go approach different organization or different agencies to get what we can get from them. Even right now, I'm part of the New York State Governor Vaccination Advisory Task Force and Equity Task Force. Those are two. I'm spending weekly 1 hour, 2 hours with them so that I can understand what is going on, how I can help community. So that's a way I will see, my IT experience, my community experience, these are the things going to benefit the board.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your interest in serving on the Board of Education. Later tonight, after the interviews have been conducted and after a brief executive session, we will come back into the public and announce the 2 finalists. Thank you very much.
Tonight you're going
Tonight, yes, later tonight.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
Everybody, we just want to announce that there will be a slight delay. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, so probably about 15 minutes or so. So we'll be taking a slight break for right now until the next candidate comes on. Thank you.
Kathy, if you didn't know, we can get started. Tell them we can get started. Mr. Templeton, can you hear me? We'll be getting started in 1 minute.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Right now.
I used those for a while. It took me about a week, and it was great.
John, can you come up and explain about your monovisions?
All the better to see you with.
All right, thanks.
Was it ready?
That works great for you. No pressure.
Great, so we'll do a mic check. Mr. Templeton, are you able to hear me?
I am, yes.
All right, great. So we will get started. So this is Thomas Templeton, and I am Elizabeth Wood, Deputy Superintendent. Thank you for your interest in serving on the Board of Education for Shenendehowa. We have a total of 20 minutes for our interview this evening. Each question has a set amount of time. I'll let you know how many minutes for each specific question. And if you look kind of toward the back, you'll see Mrs. Ford Rother holding up a one that says 1 minute, and then when she flips it over, it says 30 seconds. That tells you how much time is remaining on the question that has been asked. All right? Very good. So we will start off by having you provide a brief introduction to the board, and for that we will allocate 2 minutes.
Great. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Tom Templeton. I'm an alumnus of Shen, class of 1998, along with my wife, who is as well. We have 2 kids in Clifton Park. Their names are Lee and Cole. They're not yet school age, but have every intention of going to Shenendehowa when they are in the not too distant future. In addition to graduating from Shen, I also received my bachelor's and graduate degree locally at Siena College and at the College of St. Rose. And I've spent the last decade as a behavioral health professional, working directly with or on behalf of young people, from juvenile justice to behavioral health policy, administration, and now onto private practice and consulting. I'm here because I'm passionate about public education, particularly at Shen, where I felt called to give back to the district that's given so much to me and my family.
Okay. So the first question, who do you view as the constituency of the Board of Education? 2 minutes.
I think that we all agree that the board represents more than one group. I think depending on our background, we might prioritize those constituents differently. Certainly my background in mental health, working with young people, I would would say that kids are front and center. And so I believe that the priority, the primary constituency would be our young people. Certainly, that's not to say that our educators, our faculty and staff are not essential. I absolutely believe that we need to do right by our teachers if they are to do right by our students, by our children. And Shen has done a great job with that. Absolutely, taxpayers. For some reason, I feel like when I talk about students first, it seems as if taxpayers take a back seat, and that's just not true, not in any way. I believe, I had an opportunity to run for the board last spring, and I've sort of thought about this question quite a bit. And I'm also heavily involved in theater in the capital region. And so I've thought about taxpayers as sort of like the producers of a show, in that they sort of fund the budget, but they somehow take a back seat, even though they shouldn't, to the actors, the director, things like that. But our taxpayers are essential, just like producers are essential. And I think all constituencies are essential. One is not necessarily better than the other, but again, given my background, I find that students are the primary constituency.
How should our school board balance the need for public interest, meaning what is important to all, versus special interest, what is important to a few? Please provide some examples of how you think these topics should be addressed to balance what are often competing interests. 4 minutes.
It's a great question. Obviously, in a setting like a school district, I believe that we need to promote the greatest good for the greatest number. But I don't think necessarily, in my opinion, that special interests stand in the way of that. I in fact believe very often that special interests are in the public interest. And I think that probably speaks to my background in advocacy and mental health, particularly with respect to diversity and inclusivity. I believe that those interests are best balanced when opportunities and resources are equitable across the board.
What do you see as the primary role of the Board of Education as a whole, and you as an individual member, and what do you think will be your greatest challenge in assuming this responsibility? 3 minutes.
Certainly I see the board as collaborating as a team in conjunction with the superintendent to cultivate a student-centric vision, adopting policies and obviously the annual budget designed to bring that vision to fruition. I also think, as I alluded to earlier with respect to taxpayers, that, the board also has a responsibility to foster and encourage, an ongoing dynamic relationship with the community, with taxpayers and other members, and that community feedback should be appropriately weighed as the board sets its agenda. In terms of my role, as I mentioned earlier, I don't yet have school-age children, but I have been working very closely with children across the capital region for a decade plus. What I think that I bring in this case is a fresh set of eyes, sort of an objective perspective that's from the outside, in some ways from the outside looking in, and that's not necessarily better in any way, but I certainly think it's a unique perspective that I'm not sure that others on the board may not have. And so the last question was about the greatest challenge, was it?
Yes.
Okay. So I think probably my greatest challenge would be, negotiating the learning curve that comes with joining any new organization. Certainly, I have a sense of what this takes. Again, I've run for the board in the past, and to prepare myself, I've long been following the board meetings, community meetings as I can, and I believe that I can make that leap as quickly as anyone. But I have no illusions about the fact that negotiating that learning curve will be a challenge.
What do you view as the top 3 issues or priorities of the district and Board of Education? 4 minutes.
COVID isn't the pink elephant in the room, I'm not sure what is. So first let me start by saying, I commend Dr. Robbins and the Board of Education for their planning and on-the-ground response to this crisis. As it turns out, school is an extremely safe place to be, and I think that may come as a surprise to some, although it didn't to me. And I think that's not a result of luck. That's a result of the hard work and it's a testament to the trust that the community has placed in all of you. But we're not out of the woods. Yes, people are getting vaccinated. I think that's terrific. And I do think probably that physical safety and security will be achieved more quickly than maybe emotional well-being as it relates to the pandemic. So I think the ramifications of things like social distancing, mask wearing in general, may be sort of a lingering issue for which, I think a coordinated behavioral health strategy would not be, an incorrect way to go. So, so first is COVID. Second, I would say, both on a state and national level and absolutely on a local level, there is a call to promote diversity and inclusivity. And I think it's an opportunity for all of us to really do better than we have. And I know that Shen has some really great things going in that department. And I'm excited to be part of that, those things, if I have the privilege of serving on board. But when I think about diversity, particularly, I'm not just talking about racial diversity or cultural diversity, but also socioeconomic diversity. One of the things that we talked about, that I talked about in my campaign last spring was around, disadvantaged students not performing as well on standardized tests as their advantaged peers. And I know that there's some effort behind getting to the bottom of that, but that's an area that I think is important. And I believe that ensuring that students from all backgrounds have the same opportunities and resources for success is essential, and I think a major issue. Finally, again, sort of as it relates to COVID, but in general, the fiscal implications of the crisis and, regarding state aid. And certainly, there is some talk at this point, I don't know how detailed it is, but around the federal government trying to make states more whole, in moving forward. But, who knows what kind of impact that's going to have on the district itself. And as it's expected right now, there's not supposed to be any increase from in-state aid from 2019 and 2020 levels. And given that, there were some unexpected, unbudgeted expenditures, PPE, that's not great news. But, I also think of it as an opportunity, right, again, to connect with the community, to be able to support spending decisions with evidence so that that the taxpaying community and the community in general and families can get on board, really to open up that dialogue and be as transparent as possible.
There will be occasions when a board member's personal opinion contradicts the decision of the board. What should that board member's reaction be? 2 minutes.
Well, my hope would be that all perspectives are treated with respect and are listened to, and not with destructive criticism or personal attacks, certainly. I don't expect that in any way. I also think that all perspectives should be weighed on their merits and the evidence that may support them. That said, the board is a democratic body, and when the majority outweighs the minority, it's essential that everyone get on board. I think that's collegiality, that's important for the community to see, and certainly how I would operate if I were on board.
Of the many different roles and responsibilities a board member has, what intrigues you the most, and what areas do you see yourself having the greatest influence? 3 minutes.
Kind of like I alluded to a minute ago, I'm someone who thinks in terms of evidence. And so, for instance, I think being able to use evidence to inform our decision-making, our judgment, is something that I would look forward to being able to integrate into my work on the board. In terms of my greatest influence, I probably would say a strength would be as an advocate for young people, for students, particularly around equity in education, diversity, inclusivity, it's a natural role based on my background. It would truly be a privilege to be able to do that. And I've been more or less invested in Shen since 1985 when I started kindergarten there, and I see this as an opportunity to give back again to the district that gave so much to me and my family, and it would be an honor to sit on the board.
All right. Thank you very much. So that concludes our interview this evening. We appreciate your interest in serving on the board. The board is going to wrap up its interviews shortly and will convene into executive session. And following executive session, the two finalists for this evening's interviews will be announced as part of the meeting later on. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Wood, for conducting the interviews tonight, and I'm asking for a motion to go into executive session to review tally of interview ratings. Can I have a motion? Gus is first, Todd is second, all in favor? Okay, thank you. So we are, the board is back from executive session where we went into tally the interview ratings. Once again, a big thank you to Dr. Elizabeth Wood tonight for conducting the interviews and all of the candidates that have stepped forward. First of all, I just want to take a step back on, unfortunately, how we got here tonight with the passing of our beloved Gary DeLallo and the resignation of Christina Rajat to take care of her family. So, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that we're going to miss them, both of them, and what they did bring to this board table. But tonight, we went through an initiative that brought several candidates to the forefront to put themselves out there. And without holding on, I'm sure they're all waiting on there, so I'm just going to stop talking at this point and announce that Jason Digiani had the lowest number of points, so he is number 1, and Joseph Weber is our second. So I'd like to congratulate Jason and Joe, and let you know that, and everybody else that stepped into the public eye tonight, as many people are shying away from public service, you all stepped forward, and you must be commended for doing so. Having said that, I would also like, if you were not selected tonight, this is a very, very big district, as many of you had stated tonight in your interviews. And coming with a big district, there is plenty of opportunities to step into committees that we have, both in the schools and on the district level. So if you are interested, I ask that you continue to be active and continue to participate, because you are a part of this community, you are a part of our Shen community and a part of our Shen family. So I want to thank everybody for their participation tonight. Okay, Dr. Robinson, we did want to add on to tonight's conversation, the return to sports, and I'm going to ask you a question after you're done with that too.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stevenson. So first of all, again, I want to applaud those who, like Mr. Stevenson said, participated in the process. And just as a reminder, those individuals will serve until May, and at that point, there will be an election for 3 seats. The 2 seats that are the candidates will be sworn in on next Tuesday, and also Mr. Presley will be, I'm assuming, running as incumbent also again in May. So the process will continue to unfold as we move forward. So tonight on the agenda, the board certainly has been aware of, and the public's been aware of, there's been a lot of conversation around quote-unquote high-risk sports. Ironically, that designation actually has been lifted. That was actually a federal designation that came out of CDC that put sports in different tiers. And just this past week, ironically, the CDC lifted that designation from sports. So the timing is somewhat fortuitous in some sense. As of today, the positivity rate, what we call the 7-day average for Saratoga County, I think it's around about 3.5. And so we are certainly at a point where we are below the 4.0 threshold to start sports. This plan that the board has been shared, and this plan that will put a final version, if you will, on our website, addresses all the components of the Saratoga County DOH order, if you will, which is also consistent with several surrounding counties. And that became important because Shenendehowa, for example, we're here in Saratoga County, and we play teams in Rensselaer County, in Albany County, in Schenectady County. So we cross counties, so having some consistency was important. So when we go places, we know that we're following similar protocols. So it's a pretty comprehensive document. I want to give kudos to Mr. Coleman and several others who were instrumental in putting that together, not only for Shen, but also creating a regional document for that purpose of consistency. I know tonight the Saratoga County Board of Supervisors and the DOH took some action. I don't know the specific actions yet. I'm looking forward to reading that after this meeting, pertaining to testing protocols, just an additional step related to the plan. And so certainly we'll look at that and make those adjustments accordingly to ensure that our students have the best opportunity to remain on the field in court and not have what I call the ebbs and flows of if the rate goes up, we're out. If the rate comes down, we're in. Because I certainly don't see that as beneficial at all. And so how do we try to have a very consistent experience for kids? And related to that, just something that, and might be a post even tonight, Mr. Colin, working with some of our student leaders, starting a campaign, if you will, Mask Up Shen, which is neat, to kind of reminding not only our student athletes that in order for us to be able to continue to participate in sports, everyone has to take on the responsibility to wear their masks, to do social distancing, not only in school, but out of school, because we know that some of the greatest challenge we have are when people outside of the school environment. So we're looking forward to seeing how young people are taking on that responsibility as well. So if the board has any specific question, I certainly would address it. But it's a pretty comprehensive plan, and we're pleased with where we are, and we're ready to unfold. If the plan is approved by the board tonight, practices will be initiating tomorrow. And starting that process as well. So I'll pause there if there are any questions before the board move to a motion to act on a particular plan.
I'm going to digress from the sports. I mean, I'm in such full support, and so happy we can get going here, and I'm sure my board colleagues feel the same. So I did get some communication from a parent today, and it's not the first one, but just recognizing how we get on the field for sports. What are we doing? And we do have a virtual play going on, right? And questions going on. Okay, we're putting all this emphasis on sports. What about the theater? What about music? What about arts? What are we doing? Not just at the high school level, but at the middle school level. So I'm going to let you talk to that a little bit.
Great point, and that's a conversation that's actually happening everywhere. And the sports allowance, if you will, opens up not only, I would say, not a window, actually opens up a door for us to start having that piece of it. So I anticipate at some point the state DOH needs to come out with some new guidance related to performing arts, using the sports model, if you will, as a way to do so. The challenge that we still have with the performing arts is the current guidance talks about 12 feet distance, which makes certain things extremely challenging. So I do anticipate that some of that allowance, if you will start to occur as this starts to occur. So it's a great opportunity. And you're right, sometimes people say it's one versus another. It's never one versus the other. It's one thing happening, we use this opportunity to leverage the opportunity to do something else. So those conversations are happening right now, and we're looking forward to opportunities for the performing arts groups to be able to do more. And even so, back to what you're saying, kudos to some of our teachers and directors of those. They've been very creative to keeping kids engaged and doing things. And so the more opportunities we have, the more we try to do things in person. And I think it goes with our larger mantra from the very beginning. We're trying to get kids back in space and give kids as many opportunities to be engaged in a safe way. And I think we've proven over and over we can do that, and we will continue to do that. And when we face challenges, we'll address the challenges and make the adjustments. And just because we have challenges doesn't mean we stop. We just make the adjustments so we can keep progressing, because it's important for our kids to be engaged. And so this is not a sports thing, by the way. And I recently said to someone that when you think about this from a very symbolic way, it's and I sent out a correspondence this past week about we're moving to put COVID in the rearview mirror. It's still there, but it's no longer the hindrance from stopping you from moving forward. It's the thing that we're learning, how do we live within it, we live within it safely, and to the point that the future becomes the predominant focus. And COVID is part of the reality, but it's not the barrier to move those things. So I do see that in the foreseeable future that we'll be able to have more flexibility to do some of those things, because the push is on. And I anticipate the state's going to have to look at that very differently moving forward. There is a link to the plan. I mean, I go through it's just a long document. Yeah. Mr. Preston, I don't know. Will there be wrestling? So this plan calls for the approval of it, and the big part, because the state allows it, the big part of wrestling, as you mentioned, is a very, very much close contact sport, hand to hand, if you will. And so if there is that is the big question right now for every schools, and everyone is working on trying to figure out what's the best protocol to do so. Unlike most sports, to wrestle with your mask on becomes problematic because after the first move, the mask is off anyway. So one of the things that we're looking to see is how can testing protocols be used to allow that, and also looking in terms of what's happening in other states, because there are other states right now that wrestling is taking place. And so we're not necessarily trying to create the wheel. We just want to see a wheel that's working very well and see what we can use to adapt moving forward. So there's a lot of conversation right now with wrestling coaches and athletic directors in terms of how we do it, as well as the timing of when that occurs, in terms of how can we prepare to effectively do it. Because we never want to do something that put students in a unhealthy or unsafe situation. So that's the one that's, if you want to say there's a question mark that still need to be worked out. And being worked out as we speak, because a lot of folks across and Shen, I mean, we have probably one of the better, in fact, we have two of the best wrestlers in the country here in our school district. So it's not about how do we try to rush to get those kids exposure. It's about how do we do it effectively for any kid who wants to participate in that sport.
I don't know if you can hear me. My question has to do with the testing protocol. How will that change for those who are participating in sports?
The details are yet to be seen, because I need to see what the county health department is stipulating.
Okay.
And so once we unpack those details, related to that, we have here at Shen, and again, I'm going to refer to a correspondence that was sent out earlier this week to parents and the community at large and posted. We have 3,800 test kits, rapid test kits that are used for surveillance testing. And I want to make that distinction, because the rapid test kits is so if someone tests positive, they need to go and do a PCR testing, much more in-depth testing. And it's a surveillance test. And so we're using those not only to our employees, and talking about, I just kind of share that news. Yesterday, I think it's 150 plus employees that we tested at the middle school and high school level, a random kind of selection. Great results, no positives, and people are excited. Even people who didn't consent wanted to do it, because people realized that it's important to know. So we have scheduled for this Saturday a drive-through testing for surveillance for students. And I use the word surveillance testing because that's what it is. It's trying to get a good cross-sections of our students, and so we have some sense of where we are as a school community as it relates to COVID. So we're looking at that. We also have some tests then reserved for the purpose of using for sports once we get a better handle on that regulation, and based upon some conversations with the county, and I'm not necessarily committing the county to anything, but the county has publicly said that they also want to be a part of that solution, from the testing solution, once those protocols in place. And so I think with a combination of things, we can, hopefully the protocols that are out there now that I have yet to see, because we're here tonight, are reasonable in terms of things that we can actually implement and control, and not things that some other entity has to now intervene with, that creates another barrier for that implementation. So we see that using testing as a way to really provide, not only from a sense of, okay, you're okay, and you test sequence several times, but also even a psychological sense of confidence, which is a big part of that too as well. Sense of confidence for our students, a sense of confidence for our community, that we're doing things and doing things right. So we're looking forward to unpacking those details. Mrs. Miller was also had a question. I'm sorry.
Naomi asked my question, but I do have another one. The testing for the kids, is that going to be always through the bus garage, the drive-through? Is it going to be done during the day at school?
Well, the plan we have right now is to do the drive-through format, and some kind of challenge with one. Let me say the benefit of it. Probably a better way to answer that question. The benefit of the drive-through is that if we do have a negative, parents have their kids with them. They can go home. Versus, if we're in school, Mrs. Valente, can I ask you just to, if we're in school, the the parents have to call the parents, kids have to get picked up, and those kind of sequence. And so we're trying to do it in such a way that it's least intrusive. If we have a situation of a negative, I'll come over there in 1 second, Nancy. So that's the reason why we're trying to do the drive-through piece, and plus it's expedient. And so we'll find out, quite frankly, we're going to find out how expedient when we do it in mass. We did a pilot run, which was very expedient, and now once we do something in mass on Saturday, we have some sense of how fast can that actually work and how smooth that will work. And if we have to do something like that again, we can effectively do it. Or quite frankly, even if we're fortunate to do vaccinations, we can use a similar model some way to do some things. So there's a lot of things we're trying to see or learn from that experience. But more important, just to be a resource in a very convenient way to our community.
And I just had one final question. So we're still waiting for the protocols and the specific guidance. So this is, we're approving the plan so that when that comes in.
The plan acknowledge
Okay.
that whatever those guidances will be embedded in that document.
Okay,
That's correct.
and so we expect that. Do you have any anticipation?
The county is supposed to act on it this afternoon at 5, so
Oh,
something
okay.
should be out there right now.
Okay, great, thank you.
A question, just a comment is, and we heard it from a couple folks, without tooting our horn too much, Shen has done an amazing job when it comes to COVID. And for these kids, it's one thing that we're doing an awesome job and they're going to be able to practice and participate. We have to hope and trust that the other schools that we play against are doing the same thing, so it can be a big group hub.
You know, and just if you don't mind, Mr. Stevenson, I would say that we saw it when we pivoted last March, and everyone was wondering what would September look like. How would kids react? People saying, well, kids wear masks. But you know what? And we saw what's fall sports, and kids stepped up to the plate. Because what they realized that probably for the first time in their young lives, they were truly able to control their destiny by their actions. And that's a powerful thing. When young people realize that, wow, if I do this and not just, oh, I'm going to do something nice because I want to get a reward, versus I can control my destiny by my actions, my behavior. And I would say that young people, particularly young people, and it's not I'm not saying people who participate in sports don't have the same kind of drive, but when you participate in something, be it sports, be it music, something that you have committed to, you're willing to say, you know what, hey, I'm willing to do those things. And I think also because we've been so consistent as a system over the last since September, kids know the process, they know the routine, they know the expectations, to the point now they see it as their responsibility. And I'm just going to point to a social media thing that went out, I think a week and a half ago, where the kids started sending out a pledge. I pledge to follow these rules because they know that if we have increased cases, it impact potentially their future to do some of those type things. So needless to say, I have a lot of faith in kids. It's not blind faith. It's faith that you know what, if we hold our young people accountable, they'll rise to the occasion. And I think sometimes we don't give kids a chance to rise to the occasion. And our kids here, and I would say kids across the state or otherwise, when you give them a chance, they'll rise to the occasion. When you outline the expectations for them, they'll rise to the occasion. And I think that's the same thing that people need to do outside of school. Hold the expectations, and kids will rise to that expectation. I'm sorry, Bob had to say.
On Saturday, when someone goes in to get tested, before they leave, they will get.
No, they won't. So because they'll be contacted that same day, but we won't, because we otherwise they'll be positive. Only they'll be contacted if they're positive, because otherwise it's just backlog having people waiting. So they'll be contacted in short order, but no one will be waiting. It's a flow. So when we timed it out, it was about a minute and a half between when people got to that point, testing and everything. So it's a pretty fast process.
My only other comment was, well, here we are in winter sports. We're talking about winter sports that are inside. So you got basketball, right, volleyball. And it isn't just the second half of the year. So the sports season is actually being split. So I don't know if everybody gets that either. So you got your spring sports that are going to follow the winter sports again. So that's the lacrosse and then football at that time, right? So those are outside. So much like the field hockey and the soccer So our concern right now is because they're inside, right? So, yeah.
And just a quick comment on it, Ms. Stevenson. So I think another big question, so if there are two questions out in the sports world, is what do we need to do to be able to do wrestling? And I come from the perspective of what do we need to do to rule kids in and not to rule kids out? Because that's what does it take to, when I say rule in, to allow certain things, what does that require to do so? And if we can't meet those requirements, okay, we made a gallant effort in trying to make that a reality versus starting from the beginning and say, no, we're not going to do it because we don't want to try. No, we're going to try, and if it can't happen, okay, you know what, we made all attempts to do so. Similarly, the second piece was about spectator. And we have protocols from the fall sports. And even though fall was a little challenging, what I mean by that, for instance, when we played soccer, we had X number of people that came inside the gate, that sat in the bleachers. But part of the problem when you have outdoor sports, people linger around outside. And so in the beginning, it was a little bit to get people, hey, you got to leave. But I think people started becoming very respectful of that as the process is going. Indoor sports is actually a lot easier to control the outside lingering crowd because at the bottom line, whatever the protocols are right now, the protocols is around 50%, but we would never have 50%. We're going to be lower than 50% in spectator. And the piece of the plan is how do we phase that in? So just hypothetically, if you have playing 10 games, probably the first 2, 3, 4 games, you may not even have spectators. Because one, we just want to see what's the flow. How does that flow happen? How that goes? And then phase thing in. Because the last thing we want to do is being too wide and then have to compress versus working out to a point where it's manageable and that flow is appropriate. So those are some of the, and I share that with you because sometimes people wonder what's the thinking behind the action. And the thinking behind the action is to be very measured, very careful as we bring things unfold so that we know that we're assessing it as we're going along and not just throwing out there and see what happens. That's not the case at all because there's too much at play to do so. So I think that's in a nutshell. There's a lot of technicality pieces in the plan. Just a couple of pieces I want to point out is that this plan is also had to be endorsed by our school physician. This plan has also been reviewed by our school attorney because there's some legalese that had to be addressed. And so a lot of eyes have been on it. And so I'm pretty confident that what we're sharing with the board addresses not only the regulatory needs, but also all the protocols that we have been doing that goes even beyond the regulatory needs in terms of hygiene and testing and all those type things. When I mean self-certification, some of those things that we do right now, or we did in the past in the fall with student athletes. So again, if there are questions, I'd be certain to happen to address them otherwise.
We didn't put that on there. Okay. Okay, so one action item then, we're going to approve the approval of the participation, K through 12 high-risk sports activities. Can I get a motion? Todd is first, Gus is second. Comments, questions? All in favor? Motion passes. Okay, so, and next is our adjournment. Can I have a motion? Bob is first, Naomi is second. All in favor? Great. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.